Hey everyone, I'm going to show you how to prepare your paper. I've been using this Canson watercolor paper. This is a great paper. I will link it in the description, but it is super cheap. It's like 10 bucks for 30 pieces, and this is an 11 by 15 inch piece of paper. Okay, so I am going to gesso my paper first, and you definitely always want to work on the rough side of this. There's like more of a smooth side and then a rough side. So first, to prepare, we're going to use gesso. I love my gesso from Golden. It's just a really good quality gesso and I like it, so I recommend this. All you need is just a regular old paintbrush. You can get this at a hardware store, just something cheap that is, wider so that you can cover more surface area. And we're going to get started. So whenever I gesso, I do not like water it down at all. I just go straight into the paint and just start painting. And just make sure you cover all your surface, the whole surface area. And for me, it's okay to paint on the table, but if that's not okay for you, then you should definitely put something underneath here. And the reason why you want to go all the way to the edge, because once this is dry, we are going to tape it down. And if you don't get it all the way to the edge, when you pull your tape down, it will likely pull off some of that watercolor paper, and it'll leave you with a really rough texture on that edge, and it can even pull off some of the paint on the painting. So just make sure, just make sure you get all the way to the edge. Okay, once your paper is fully dry, we are going to tape it down. This is just an artist tape. That's white. I like white. I mean, you can get whatever you want, but this is particularly for art projects, but you could use masking tape. Whatever you have is fine. And the way that I like to tape, half on the paper and half on the table, so you can kind of see through it. It's a little transparent, so you can sort of see through it. That's just like kind of a general rule of thumb, and then you'll know how to do the others. Okay, and there you have it. You are ready to paint.
We're going to start by talking about the primary colors blue, red, and yellow. Now, these are pure colors that can't be mixed from any other colors, and you can mix virtually any color hue from these three colors. Let me show you by painting a color wheel. I'll start by swatching down our red, or primary magenta, yellow, and blue. In this case, ultramarine blue. Any color I get from mixing two of these colors is known as a secondary color. So mixing red and yellow, I get orange, mixing red and blue, I get purple, and mixing yellow and blue, I get green. Now, if I mix a primary color with a neighboring secondary color, like red and orange, I get a tertiary color. In this case, red-orange. Orange and yellow make yellow-orange, yellow and green make yellow-green, etc., as we move around the color wheel. If I mix a color and add white, I'm able to lighten that hue's value, and this is called a tint. If I mix a color and add black, I'm able to darken the hue's value, and this is called a shade. When it comes time to combine colors to make a color palette, there are certain color relationships that sing in harmony together. One you may already be familiar with is monochromatic, or sticking to a single hue and varying the saturation and value. Another common one is analogous, which means using colors that are next to each other. Complementary colors are ones that sit across from each other on the color wheel, and these palettes are pleasing for their contrast they bring to a piece. From there, the harmonies get a little bit more complex. I have this color wheel here, and on the back it actually has a cool quick reference for creating palettes with these relationships. If I put the spinner on a color, I can follow the arrows to see what colors I can pair with the main hue to create a cohesive palette. But here's one of my favorite, most used, and practical ways to use the color wheel and these color relationships while painting. I now want to show you the process for attempting to mix a color that you see. This color swatch here is showing one of my favorite acrylic wash colors, olive. If I happen to run out of olive, I wouldn't have to fear because what I know about color theory, I bet I can mix it. Next, we're going to compare this color to our reference and see what we notice. The first thing I see is the color temperature. The yellow I have is a lot cooler than my olive, and I know that I can warm this up by adding a little bit of magenta. Since an even mix of the two would make orange, I'm going to go a little lighter on the magenta just to tint it. Now when I compare the colors, I can see the color is warmer, but still not quite right. It looks too orange. So what do I do if I want to lower a color's intensity? I look to its complement, which is blue. So I'm going to add a dab of blue. The hue is starting to look really good, but now the value isn't quite right. I'll adjust that by adding a touch of white, and if I add too much of a color, I can balance it out by adding in the pigments that are missing. I'm able to get pretty close here. Of course, if the color you're trying to mix is very much darker or lighter than the color, then you're going to need to bring in those neutrals in order to get the value of the mix correct.
This lesson is going to be all about brush control techniques. By the end of it, you'll have a really good idea of how to use different types and sizes of brushes. We'll do some techniques with these angular brushes, we'll try some of the really thick brushes, and we'll also try some round detail brushes. So to get started, I'm going to go ahead and use my navy paint for this. So I'm going to squeeze some of the paint onto my palette. And with my water dish handy, I'm going to start by using a medium-size angled brush. So this one has a nice diagonal angle to it, which is going to be really great because we can get that finer point to make strokes on the page, and we can also use the thick end to make these big, thicker strokes. So what I'm going to do is dip in a little bit of water and just get a nice fine consistency of that paint on my brush, get it really nice and coated. And I'm moving this around so that I am avoiding getting these big globs of paint. I want it to be a nice even coating onto the bristles of my brush. Maybe add a little more water. Cool. So I'm just going to practice making these brush strokes. Since I have that paint evenly coating on the bristles, I can just take my brush, holding it nice and loose like a pencil, and I can drag my brush across the page. Cool. I did a great job evenly coating the bristles because that paint is a pretty even smear across the page. And just as a quick tip, anytime you feel like you might be losing control or the brush strokes just aren't looking that good, always add a little bit of water. Water really helps the paint spread evenly on the page and you'll have more control. And now I want to try using the fine tip of my brush. So I'm going to pull that across the page and practice some really fine lines using that tip of the angle. So now I'm going to try a wavy line using both the thin and thicker angles of my brush. So now I'm going to switch over to my round brush. This is a detail brush. I use it when I'm painting any sort of things that I want it to be a perfect swatch or perfect stroke. So adding a little bit of water, getting a nice even coating onto the bristles, and trying some more lines. I'm going to try a wavy line with this one. So with this, if you hold your brush really lightly on the paper as you draw a stroke, it'll be a thin line. If you press harder onto the page, it can be thicker. So one thing I do that I've learned from calligraphy is to do these really light upstrokes like this, and then heavy downstrokes. So this is a technique I do in calligraphy all the time, and sometimes it's fun to transfer that over into acrylics. You can do the same thing with waves, light, heavy, light, heavy, light, heavy, and just playing around with fun techniques. All right, I'm going to take a break from this one and move on to my larger brush. So I'm going to dab into the palette. Cool. And try making some different types of textures. That's pretty fun. I really like seeing the close-up of that texture coming through. You can also paint dry like this. So right now there's no water on my brush, it's just these dry brush strokes. There's some really cool effects and textures happening there. This would be a cool thing to layer different colors on top of to make a texture. Maybe I'll try that out in a future painting. And if I add some water to this brush, let's see how that looks. Ooh. All right, I'm gonna toss this one in the water. That cup is getting pretty full. All right, so one more. I'm going to load my palette knife with some of that blue paint and then smear it on the paper. So you can load up your palette knife. I load it on the back end of the knife right here. And what you can do is just take it and drag it across your page. Awesome. You see a really nice change in tonality there, which is a cool technique you can get with your palette knife. So yeah, we have these different tonalities, different textures. There's a lot of variation we can do with acrylics, and that's one of my favorite things about acrylics.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to like and subscribe to stay up to date on all of our latest videos.